And my sister was at the time, again, 13 years old, and that is when she started dating around. And also, when she got into high school, she had her first boyfriend in high school when my brother was 1 year above her and in the same school. And even though I have no idea what my brother had been doing, I'm sure that he had not been doing much because he was very, very keen on studying. But my sister had her first few boyfriends in high school, so her body count was around two, three, or four even by the time she graduated. After which she got into university, and then again she started dating there. Another few people she had been with, but the point I'm trying to make is that I'm no different from her because I also had this whole phase, so to speak, just a little bit later because I started at the age of 18. I had my first intimate relationship at that age, and then from there on, I just went into this extremely fast cycle of being with people, men, in an intimate way. And then I stopped when I met someone special because he just reminded me of so many other things in my life that had happened before I was 18 in a very intriguing way. And he inspired me, he motivated me, he mentored me even. So we kind of got along, but then as I lost touch with him, I kind of started seeing more clearly and realizing what just went down in my whole life. And basically, I had been lied to, that's for sure. I do not recommend cheating because if not on you, then on your partner or your children or your direct environment, the implications will wear and show. And what I mean by this is my mother's behavior changed the whole family dynamic because she not only lost herself for her husband and never gained it back, regardless of what my father must have done. I mean, obviously, he wasn't a perfect husband because nobody is a perfect husband, but I think the level of how much I respect him compared to my mother is just immeasurable. And on top of that, he just taught me things that I like him more for than what my mom ever did to me that I love or like her for. So, maybe my mother nursed me, maybe my mother clothed me, but these things I could have easily learned from a YouTube video. And this is not just the Oedipus complex speaking from me. I genuinely mean that I think my father had been so much a better person. Maybe again, it was because he was more valued in society and in patriarchy, but for some reason I also interpreted everything my mother did as something wrong and shameful because I remember that was the primary emotion that surrounded everything that my mother had done at the time, coming from herself also. So I saw nothing else. I didn't know that a woman could feel, proud of herself, content in herself, happy about her life, just grateful for her family. And I do remember these things, in a blurry way from early childhood when I really did feel happy, when my mother definitely had not been cheating. For example, I have a photo of me when I am 6 years old and I stand at a celebration of a birthday, which, if I remember correctly, was mine. And I remember being happy enough, but I also remember already having been upset with my mother for some reason. And it may not even have been because she was being a cheater at the time, so maybe it was just the shame that she'd been suppressing, who knows. I remember I was still majorly happy at like 5 years old. But okay, so when I was 8 years old, kind of everything changed because I had already been accepted to elementary school, and fortunately I got accepted because I went to specified elementary school for sports related studies, and we did a lot of physical activity there, and I developed a habit and a love and an appreciation for physical exercise, and therefore health consciousness, body awareness, things like that. So that's where my enthusiasm stems from in a lot of ways, and also that was very socially inclusive and building for the whole class as well. But because I had been so involved with the class culture and just the social dynamics in that place, because it was so new for me and so fresh, my mother kind of misunderstood because she was also going through it, and she got me out of that school for various reasons. And honestly, it was just the beginning of the whole journey, because then up until the age that I am now, I changed schools for, let me count again because I have to count every time because I always forget. 8 times. So overall, I changed schools 8 times, including universities. And the only things I quote unquote finished were high school and a basic degree in like making coffee or something. So that's my, high education. But everyone says all the time that, at least you finish high school, but that's not how I see it. I know my father is a doctor. I know my mother had been winning competitions when she was in high school, so I was like always extremely dissatisfied with my performance everywhere I went. And I just want to talk a little bit about my sister because she was more mature and she already had been biologically, fertile and mature at 13 when my mother had started cheating, and how she got impacted. I mean, my sister, by my mother cheating, was entirely different than how it happened to me because I was much younger. So, because my sister was around 13, she had been sexually active from a young age, and I remember my father just standing in on the second floor talking to my sister. On the second floor, every bedroom was, so all 3 children had their bedrooms on the second floor, and my father was just standing there and talking to my sister in like a very strict and kind of confusing way about how she must not, like date around like at such a young age, she must not sleep with men, things like that. But again, because mother is just so extremely powerful, my sister obviously kept doing whatever my mom had been doing. And so basically I found out, not only because of intuition and not only because my mother never ever needed to tell me that she'd been cheating, because I already knew without ever even having been told, to my mother's surprise, obviously. But I also found a notebook like at around 20 years old, in which she wrote literally what she did during her cheating season and how many men she'd done it with. and whom she addressed the notebook to, which was her 2 daughters. And that came to me as a surprise because, first of all, I was quite old when I lost my virginity, so to speak. So when I became sexually active. So the reason I did not like that my mother had addressed the notebook towards me is multifold. First of all, I was never meant to understood the contents of that book because, first of all, that's like very intimate. I don't want to know how someone you have made a vow to, you broke in all ways, and you broke your family because you broke that vow that you made in the name of respect and love and in a covenant towards God. How something that seemed like fun because it made you feel alive for a short while is now seeming as though it's worth it. You know, just the whole notebook itself was so short. Like, the writing itself was so short in it. I finished the reading in like 5 minutes, if that. But it was so chaotic, man. It was so chaotic and just so like a small child could have written it. You know, like it was such energy that I had been missing in my mom for such a long time, because honestly I hate it when women give their innocence away, especially when they already had made a vow by choice in front of a crowd, in front of God, in front of a husband, in front of a pope or a priest, like, sorry, not a pope, a priest, like in front of people, you know, having given birth multiple times and then you start cheating. Like, I'm sorry, but like, okay. So my sister was 13 years old when that happened, and I did not, you know, as a second best option, kind of, instead of kind of seeking so hard to look up to my mother, I started looking up to my sister instead, again, for a lack of a better option. But since my sister had been looking up to my mother so eagerly all her life, obviously because that's her mother, her main source of femininity, officially, I kind of also slipped in the same cycle, only I was a bit older and a bit more mature, you know, in thinking. But honestly, I see the defects that season, that cheating, that dating around, that sleeping around season had caused in my sister in brain development. But also it could be because she altered her body with contraceptive pill, and you know, my father kind of found out, and then that initiated a conflict. But seeing that as kind of the one that had not been part of that was hard for multiple reasons. I knew that I was growing up in an empty home, emotionally speaking, and while my parents were so bothered about all this drama that both them and my siblings had been experiencing so much on their skin, while I was growing right into it, I was just, you know, feeling empty inside all the time. And this combined with the amount of times that I had been changing schools out of force because my mother alone decided to do that, because my father kind of always just agreed for some reason. It was ridiculous. It was ridiculous. I became like so odd, you know, like I just became so odd to myself. And I just never ever liked myself or loved myself or even accepted myself. It's not even about self-love, honestly. It's just about finding a level of self-contentment that you can rely on and trust. But it was so messed up, man. And so that's like the downside of one person's sexuality impacting the whole family dynamic while the parents are still together on paper. The upside of, I hate the world, I hate the word, but not the world. I like the world. I hate the word, but sexual promiscuity or sexual freedom, so to speak, the only upside, I think, in my opinion, could be that you experience the opposite of sexual suppression, which is a step towards healing. So coming from a marriage, for example, in which sex is literally all that matters because it is written in scripture or whatever, that is your role, kind of, you get told that to reproduce is your goal. I mean, that can give a purpose, but like may not be compatible with literally every person on earth, so and also to kind of develop a mature mindset in general, you might want to kind of literally explore your options. Like that is usually and normally and healthily what happens in teenage years and in young adulthood, is people are becoming a bit more free and exploring to just experience more so that later they can make wiser decisions. But my parents specifically had been given the package of marry, have children, get a good job, get good grades. Of course, not in this order, but they did exactly what I just said. And then they thought that they had, only had to get just a golden retriever to fulfill happiness. But it turned out that that is not exactly like the opposite of happiness, because all three of their children turned out to be miserable. And I mean, especially in sexuality wise, especially sexuality wise, because our romantic lives are a disaster, all three of ours. And you know it's not our fault. But we never had been introduced to children our age or young people our age. In fact, we had been discouraged from dating, and we had been discouraged from living in our divine essence, which is either feminine or masculine, depending on who we're talking about. We had been discouraged from doing most things except studying, because that was my father's main focus, like all his life, while he was in a adaptive age and era and state, especially when he met my mother. So we never really knew what we had to do as the next generation. And my brother is millennial, but I am Gen Z, and I am kind of middle Gen Z. So the youngest Gen Z is kind of right about now graduating high school. Even I think my sister is Gen Z, but she's on the edge of being Gen Z and millennial. So she's right in the middle, if I remember correctly. But basically she's literally the middle child in all ways. And me and my brother often think we do not understand each other, but it always comes as a surprise that millennials and Gen Z have the same parents, so they kind of understand each other indeed, so it's not such a huge gap. But the gap is definitely huge between us, the children, and the parents, and it's kind of scary to me at times. And I haven't even gone into the abuse stories yet, but maybe I will, the more you request it, of course. But regardless of whether you encourage me, I may do that, because like that's just part of my story. But for today, the cheating was on display. And so basically, what is good for you in the bedroom, right, is something related to things that have nothing to do with your sexuality. Because the truth is that things that have nothing to do with you romantically speaking are really who you are, but who you are is not exclusive of your sexuality, meaning your sexuality and your being literally are one and the same, and they go hand in hand. And that implies that when you do something with someone intimately, you get those demons around yourself that other person had been carrying with themselves for so long, right? You become one flesh with that person, and it's like you don't realize that at the time. You don't even know why it feels good, because it's natural mainly. But you don't even know why natural feels good, because it's been such a long time since you got to experience it for yourself. But what I'm trying to say is that we demonize so many things, but they're right things to demonize sometimes, because we believe so many things that are just not true or just not up to date, you know? It's so sad to me, because I grew up with all the demons that all these stranger men carried into our holy household when I was 8 years old. I grew up with all these demons. I grew up with an emotionally underdeveloped mother and her chaotic irresponsibility when she should have been most responsible towards herself and her children and myself. And I grew up with abandoned husband who should have been the respected head of the household. And I grew up with sister who had been living like a mouse without a head, or sorry, chicken without a head, like most her years. And I grew up with a brother who couldn't stand being home. And then I grew up to feel like I never had a home, you know? So, sexuality can be powerful, it can be empowering, but I just want to say one more thing. Cheating is one thing, right? When you keep dildos in your bedroom, that's a completely different level of betrayal, because that doesn't even involve demons. That doesn't even involve social responsibility, so to speak. It doesn't even involve protection. It doesn't even involve discussions. It doesn't even involve cheating. It's just cheating morally, but not physically. You know, it's just cheating emotionally, but not financially, whatever. You know, it's not a complete thing, but it's still a thing. Why? Because I had grown up to touch myself, so to speak, all my life. And if not for any other reason than for the reason that I thought it had been necessary and natural. But my mom, once I remember I found her dildo in her handbag while, like, after she got back from work, which I couldn't believe, because like, why would you do it at work? But anyway, you know, at least she didn't do it in front of us like her children. But again, this, I'm sorry if you're listening to this. I said the audience for adults only, but if your child listening to this, just have a compassionate mindset towards yourself and forgiveness towards me, because like I'm not saying you will understand, but if you go through what I went through for the sake of understanding me, then you will understand, and please try not to go through it, or at least just let it go. Like, don't hold on to this story, because it doesn't have to be yours. We are complete, strangers. So, but I'm your friend, I can tell you this, but anyway, my mother never felt like a friend to me whatsoever, even though she always treated me like some idiot, and almost as though I had been her friend. And she used me like an emotional punching bag. I know I'm not alone. But the thing is, that one time when I found out, like, I couldn't believe what she had been hiding there, even though I remember, obviously, I had been masturbating myself all the time. She felt so ashamed about it. And honestly, I just want to talk a little bit about masturbation, because I don't think enough young people talk about it. But I mean, porn is getting more and more talked about, fortunately, but I don't think it's ever going to reach the level of awareness of humanity that it needs to achieve. So I will start with masturbation, because that is like a more general term, and it doesn't even require external stimuli. It just kind of requires you, like your own body and your own thoughts, and that's what makes it so isolating and kind of dehumanizing, because like, one thing I do agree with scripture in is that masturbation is not good for you. I don't know if that's actually written in scripture, but if it is, I completely understand, because honestly, it almost killed me at one point when I was like much older, so much older than even 18 years old, when I was still like full of life force energy, and it didn't even occur to me that maybe the act is not the best thing for me. But this thing is like so shady, honestly, that it can carry on for years and years, and no one will notice, and you will not talk about it to anyone. And that's the thing, like, the minute you start hiding it, it becomes a secret. But anything that is a secret will be found out. You will hear words from God, from people, from the mouths of people. You will hear it back when you least expect it. You will be faced with own shadows and reflections when you least expect it, when you've been running it for the longest time, even without meaning to, even just because that's the only thing that you saw. It's like, it's the deepest, it can be the deepest secret of you, and it's like, you don't need to contain all that. Like, I wish you didn't, because it's a coping mechanism, honestly, and coping is not healing. And we only cope with things when we think we cannot change them. We cannot change the stressor, but it doesn't make the stressor go away. And sex is just important. And the thing is that we all become biologically mature at a certain age. Most women around the age of like 10, 13, 15. I personally reached maturity at 13, so I got my first period at 13. It was a sacred event. It happened a little bit after my birthday, right before we went to a family camp. It was peaceful and celebrational, but it doesn't happen to many people that way. So, you know, to men it happens later, almost without noticing, but to them the physical change is very obvious. They go through puberty almost like they are growing like a mushroom, and then their voice changes, so it's a beautiful change for every person when it happens naturally, and it's just natural, it's just good. But when you mess with that initiative energy, because initiation is masculine and receptivity is feminine, and when a woman, for example, masturbates, she initiates her own sexuality, which is extremely unnatural for her. So for example, if she's not emotionally or sexually contained, her being doesn't feel contained and she only copes by touching herself, that is literally such a fine line between suicide and just flying away from home, honestly, because like, I don't know if you understand, but it's for her, it's just more natural to be in a receptive feminine state. And I don't care about the woman's age. I don't care how much energy she still has in her. She can totally focus all that energy on the right things and on the things that build her future, her financial freedom, security, her political sense, her social awareness, her awareness about human cruelty, her family, just everything. But the reason I'm listing these things is because sexual energy can be a really manifesting energy, and it's because sexuality is one's being and involving one's being. You cannot do something again in the bedroom that does not affect your life outside of the bedroom. So the opposite, ironically, may not necessarily be true, but it is most of the time true. So for example, if you develop yourself outside of the bedroom, you, especially as a woman, you will become better as a partner. You will become more trustworthy, you will become more mature, more responsible looking, and not in a bad way, not in a masculine way, but in a soft way, in a beautiful way. You will, you potentially will kind of, I hope, enjoy yourself more in life and in everywhere else. So, you know, I'm just trying to emphasize that your sexuality is literally you. It's not apart from you. If you're a man or if you're a woman, and the more you embrace the fact that what you do as a person impacts you, will also impact your maturity later, the more confident you have the potential to be, and the more secure you have the potential to be. But also your environment matters a lot, because they are the primary physical container that you grow up in. So even if they don't give you emotional containment, they can still kind of either punish or reward you for what you do, even without you realizing why, or they can just influence you. And they probably will, the younger you are. So I just don't want to discourage you from achieving your dreams, because I know what it feels like to be told, "Oh, you're so young, you still have your all the time to yourself. You have the time on the world, all the time in the world." And yet I feel like I'm so old. I've been through so much. I'm not trying to emphasize that you have all the time in the world. It's not my point. My point is that the understanding that can take place in your head is so high, the more secure in yourself you become as you age, that you definitely cannot grasp that yet, because you were not meant to be able to grasp that. So just don't give up on yourself, because literally someone will, someone probably will break your heart, but I'm not trying to let you down preemptively. It's just that you don't have to break your own heart in your own bedroom before you meet someone and build up all these expectations in yourself and in your sexuality, you know what I mean? By just touching yourself and not being touched by anyone else. Like, you don't have to fantasize about anything. You literally can live in reality and then be like, okay, I'm healthy, I'm good, I'm put together, I'm ready for a partner now, but not because I am independent, not because I am codependent, but because I want to mutually benefit with them, and I want to interdepend with them, not just on by choice. For women, again, it's a bit more complex, because women were meant to thrive in tribe only, and while men are the initiators of that tribe, women are not. Women are the receivers of the resources. So if you don't have that as a woman, regardless of your age, it becomes survival mode. I'm not gonna lie, and sometimes that can also like kick women into this quote unquote hoe phase that they start later in life, but that again is not about them wanting to genuinely find a partner. It's literally just their bodies telling them, you have been told that you need to sell your body for any price rather than let yourself kind of like starve to death. So that's what our bodies tell us when we do that, but it's literally flight or fight. So it's like not real love, even if you do that like a soldier, with anyone. So I have been saying a lot of things because I don't know how many people will be listening to this, but it's like I think I know that what I talk about is really common and it's really relatable to a lot of people, regardless of age, gender, or ethnicity. And I just want to shed light on a part of the world that somehow still doesn't get enough attention, because my body may be my product, but it's not for sale anymore. And honestly, I don't think it's ugly when it's on sale. I just think how it's on sale and why is really what matters, because I want to marry a person if ever. I want to have children with a person if ever. I want to trust a person if ever. I want to have a person's heart if ever, who is as genuine as me. And I want to do that because he is honestly not my only option. And I'm not trapped, I'm not a captive, I'm not an isolated victim, but I am empowered, not like in a masculine way, because I masturbate every week, God forbid, but because I know myself. And I'm not embarrassed about the fact that if I am dressed up elegantly a given day and someone compliments on it, it's not up to anyone to search for fault in that, because it is just natural that men like visually beautiful things and women are just, visually beautiful just the way they are. and there's not much they can do about it, although there is some things that they can do about it. But again, culture has a lot to do with this. The social interactions between men and women who just get to know each other. But I will talk a bit more about containment, masculine containment, tribe, things like that, and even female empowerment in the future, maybe in the form of a book, which would be all the more exciting for sure, and a bit lengthier, but it will be delivering much more info and worthwhile. So if I do that, then stick around. If I don't do that, I hope you kind of found relief in this video.